Hello, I'm Richard Seltzer. I'd like to share with you an excerpt from my novel Together Tales that will soon be published by All Things That Matter Press. Here's the opening chapter of that novel. The epigraph is a snippet of poetry from Robert Herrick. Gather ye rosebuds as ye may, old time is still a-flying, and this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying. What has been lost? Gather ye rosebuds, that line means something more today than it did when Herrick wrote it. Yes, of course, we age and die, and each year seems to go by faster than the last. But now, in addition to that, we know that the world itself can change suddenly. Everything is transitory, not just us. I'm alone now, and billions of others are either alone or in small family groups due to social distancing. Those words we never used together until a couple months ago, an oxymoron that is now part of life, part of our everyday life. A story beginning this way should be the stuff of dystopic science fiction set in the far future after civilization fell apart. I don't know if this plague, like the ones that came before, will pass and life will return to the old normal, or if there is no going back. Twice before in my lifetime, mankind went through what felt like no going back changes. The Vietnam War, combined with domestic upheaval and the oil embargo, changed our perceptions and our priorities. Likewise, the attacks on 9/11 changed how we viewed the present and the future, but life went on. Within a few years, it was as if those events had never occurred. I'm reminded, too, of London during the Blitz, as recorded in novels and movies, how quickly people adapted to a new normal, millions living with the daily threat of random, imminent death, feeling empathy and responsibility not just for family and friends, but also for the strangers around them. Then the war ended, and they too returned to a semblance of their old normal. I hope that will be the case this time as well, but we may not be so lucky. A few years from now, looking back, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic may seem far apart. Something may be lost with nothing gained. Now, in the midst of it, not knowing the eventual outcome, I look back a few years with nostalgia to a time that may never return, the good old days, the golden age, a time when daily life was much simpler. The headline in today's news reads, "Satellite images show armadas of vacant cruise ships huddling together at sea." The photos show ships clustered and circling in the Atlantic. From far above, they might be a school of dying whales. Those ships aren't riding out a storm. No port has dock space to accommodate them, nor would any port welcome them, bringing the dread contagion that spread rapidly on shipboard, with the world watching news videos as they were turned away repeatedly and forced to wander. Now with no passengers, just skeleton crews who have no place to go and no way to get there, those ships, some of which cost more than $1 billion to build, are in holding patterns, in the hope that the pandemic will end and that they will go back to business. But this may be the end of that industry and the end of the way of life it supported. It's against that backdrop that I remember and record a many-storied cruise from 2 years ago. On a cruise, strangers could be thrown together around the same dinner table for the duration, 7 days or 2 weeks, or all the way up to the ultimate, a world cruise of 111 days. This was a 7-day Eastern Caribbean cruise on the Regal Princess, a floating town with 3,500 passengers and 1,300 crew. This time, by chance, my dinner companions were articulate, creative, and fun. One among us, Uncle Adolph, served as ringmaster, coaxing us to tell our personal stories and then to create new stories that kept us entertained and bonded us together with our knowledge of and concern for one another. Of course, at the time, none of us had the least suspicion that the world we took for granted would soon change, that the tales that we shared over dinner might soon seem like fairy tales, impossible in harsh conditions of a new normal. I treasure those stories, all the more now as I remember and record them, trying with my words to preserve the romantic flavor of that bygone age, the hopes and desires that once shaped lives and that now seem unreal. I didn't know at the time that human nature could change so much, that we could adapt so quickly to survive not just contagion, but economic disruption as well, and that might mean the end of hopes and dreams and the end of what we once thought of as romantic love. I don't want to imply that cruises by nature are romantic, a la Love Boat. These stories, for the most part, were not about shipboard romance. The ship was the setting for the telling of the tales, not necessarily the setting of the tales themselves. I'm not just lamenting the end of cruising. The loss is far greater than that. Romantic love itself may have ended, God forbid. I should start by introducing my fellow travelers, describing and sketching their backstories and having them talk about their life experiences. Instead, I'll start with a story that, for me, epitomizes the reason for writing this book. For those who like an orderly, predictable narrative, the teller of this tale was Beth, and she told it on day 5, but the story stands on its own and makes clear my sense of change and loss. Enough of introduction. Let Beth begin. You'll find among the recordings here The Princess Tango. That's that first story. I want to give you a sense of the context. Please let me know if you like this, and I'll do more of the same. My name again is Richard Seltzer, as in Alka-Seltzer. My email is seltzer@seltzerbooks.com. This was the opening of Together Tales, a novel that will soon be published by All Things That Matter Press. That same publisher recently released 3 other books of mine, Parallel Lives, Beyond the Fourth Door, and Nevermind. You can find those all at Amazon as paperbacks and as ebooks. They can be read in any order. They're independent stories with overlapping theme and styles. Each presents a different view of reality, a different way of trying to make sense of the mysteries of life.